I had a deal with this ice-cold CEO lady. I give her my jeans. She pays me $5 million, and once the baby arrives, we call it even and I get the hell out. Turns out I was too good at my job and she had twins. Everything went crazy outside the delivery room, so I grabbed the weaker crying baby boy and bolted with the cash. For 6 years I lived out in the countryside raising chickens and growing vegetables, and my boy was happy and healthy. Then one day I drove my three-wheeler into town to sell produce, and a Maybach pulled up right in front of me. Out stepped a little boy in a suit who looked exactly like my son. "Dad, when did you sneak off and have another kid behind my back, my son?" Jimmy hollered that at the top of his lungs like he was performing at a sold-out show. Every grandpa and grandma selling veggies, every auntie and uncle buying them. All eyes snapped onto me instantly and I was so done. I was absolutely cooked, my brain just went completely blank. And I almost dropped the cabbage I was about to pitch to some lady. Cold sweat was already dripping down my forehead, and I never in a million years would have guessed that 6 years of quiet country living would come to an end in the most humiliating way possible. Across from me by the Maybach stood that boy in the little suit and tiny bow tie. A pint-sized version of a CEO staring at us with the same shocked look as my son, but with a lot more suspicion and curiosity mixed in. And then the car door behind him swung open again, and out came a long leg wrapped in black stockings. Followed by that face, the one burned into my DNA, the one that jolts me awake from nightmares. It was Quinn 6 years later. And she was exactly the same ice on her face size, cold enough to freeze you solid. The only difference was that her usual stone-cold expression had the tiniest crack in it. Her eyes first landed on my son Jimmy, that little mud-speckled face that looked just like mine, then slowly drifted over to the little suit boy, two identical kids. One in patched-up jeans looking like a little mud monster, one in a tailored suit looking like a little prince. The air felt like it had completely frozen, and I swear my heart was hitting like 180 beats a minute. "Dad, say something. Do you have a whole other family in the city? What about me and Daisy from down the road, huh, you jerk? When did I ever have a thing with Daisy, that is the village mayor's dog?" I slapped my hand over Jimmy's mouth and forced out a smile that looked worse than a cry. Kids say the craziest things, don't they, haha? Quinn ignored me, her eyes were like two sharp scalpels, slowly cutting across me and Jimmy, and the two bodyguards behind her had already quietly moved to flank us from both sides, and I thought only one thing: run. I slammed the gas on my three-wheeler, and this old buddy who had ridden with me for 6 years let out one last defiant roar and shot forward, carrying me and a whole load of vegetables. "Stop him!" Quinn called out in that ice-cold voice from behind me. Man, back in the day, they called me the Drift King of the Mountain. I floored it. My three-wheeler went absolutely wild through the narrow aisles of the market, knocking over 2 fruit stands, crushing a whole pile of tomatoes, while the yelling from vendors and the pounding footsteps of bodyguards all blended together. "Dad, you're so awesome, this is just like a movie." Jimmy was screaming with excitement in my arms. "Yeah, right, we're running for our lives, but even my three-wheeler had its limits." The second we burst out of the market, a black Range Rover cut right across my path, completely blocking the way, and 2 bodyguards came from both sides and yanked me off the vehicle like I weighed nothing. They pinned me against the hood of a Maybach, my cheek pressed flat against the cold paint. Jimmy was scooped up by another bodyguard, but he wasn't scared one bit. He was already making faces at the little suit boy Quinn walked over in her heels, one step at a time until she was right in front of me. "Jade," she said my name quietly, but it sent a shiver straight through my whole body. Long time no see. I struggled to lift my head and forced out the most pathetic grin. "Ms. Quinn, what a coincidence, are you here grocery shopping too?" The corner of Quinn's mouth twitched, but she didn't answer me. Instead, she crouched down and looked at Jimmy, who was being held by the bodyguard, and reached out like she wanted to touch his face. Jimmy leaned his neck back and eyed her with full suspicion. "Who are you? Listen up, lady. Don't even think about being my stepmom. My dad belongs to Daisy. Let me say this one more time, Daisy is a dog." Quinn's hand froze in midair. She took a long, deep breath, stood back up, and turned her gaze onto me again. That look felt like she wanted to tear me apart piece by piece. 6 years ago, I gave birth to twins, right? Quinn's voice was dead calm, but underneath that calm was a volcano about to blow. I felt the bodyguard pressing my shoulder dig in even harder. Admitting it meant death, denying it also meant death, so I might as well go down swinging. I rolled my eyes and immediately switched to my most shocked and innocent face. "Twins, Ms. Quinn, what are you even talking about?" "I have no idea what you mean." I pointed at Jimmy with the most earnest look I could manage. "This is my nephew. My brother and sister-in-law died in a car accident. I've been busting my butt raising him all by myself. It ain't easy, and I even tried to squeeze out some tears. You can see how much this kid looks like me. They always say nephews take after their aunts, and nephews take after their uncles, but before I could even finish, Jimmy wasn't having it. "Dad, what are you even saying? Since when do you have a brother? My grandma and grandpa have been gone forever." I looked at this kid who was absolutely wrecking me and wanted nothing more than to find a hole in the ground and disappear. "This is Ethan's birth certificate along with the hospital records from back then." Her eyes were locked onto me like she wouldn't let go. The records show that the baby boy in Incubator B went missing 3 hours after he was born. My heart sank hard. Well, that was careless of me. Back then I was so focused on running that I forgot to cover my tracks. Coincidence, this has got to be a coincidence. Quinn didn't bother going back and forth with me anymore. She just turned straight to the bodyguard and gave the order, "Take them to Summit Villa. Also get Attorney Jong on the line. I want a paternity test done immediately." "Yes, Miss Quinn." And just like that, I was treated like a criminal, hauled off by 2 bodyguards and shoved into the Range Rover. Jimmy got tossed in too. He wasn't scared at all. He was happily running his hands all over the leather seats. "Dad, this car is way nicer than your three-wheeler." "Yeah, well, what good is being nice if it still got us caught?" The whole ride was dead silent. The convoy headed straight to a luxury gated community on the edge of the city. Summit Villa, just the name alone told you how insanely expensive it was. The car stopped in front of a villa that looked like an actual castle, and Jimmy and I were escorted inside. The living room was big enough to host a track meet, and the crystal chandelier overhead was making me dizzy. Jimmy lost his mind the second we walked in, rolling around on the carpet like a happy puppy. Quinn sat in the main sofa, and the little boy named Ethan sat quietly beside her, holding a tablet, but his eyes kept sneaking glances at Jimmy, who was now barking like a dog on the floor. The contrast was unreal. Quinn finally spoke up. "I'll give you one chance, pay back the $5 million you took. Leave the kid here and you can get out of my sight." My stomach dropped. The money, that $5 million, was long gone, spent on building a house back in the countryside, buying land, raising chickens, and keeping me and Jimmy fed for 6 whole years. But more than that, she wanted me to leave Jimmy behind, and I watched my boy tearing across that carpet, laughing without a care in the world. That kid was my whole heart. I raised him from diapers with my own 2 hands. I took a deep breath, and for the first time looked Quinn dead in the eyes. "Miss Quinn, I can figure out how to pay you back. But Jimmy is my son, your son." Quinn looked at me like I had just told the funniest joke she'd ever heard. "Don't forget what our contract said. You were nothing but a donor, and the contract never said anything about what happens if there are twins." I pushed back and held my ground, but that baby was so fragile back then. The doctors even said he might not make it. It was me who took him out to the countryside and fed him back to health, 1 spoonful at a time with rice porridge and home remedies, and that is the truth. Jimmy was born premature, so tiny and frail, his cries sounded like a little kitten. I took him and ran partly for the money, but also because I was scared that this cold woman would just throw him away. Quinn's expression shifted slightly, but she locked it back down in a second. "I don't care about the process. I only care about what happened, and what happened is you stole my money, and you stole my son." She stood up and looked down at me like I was nothing until the paternity results come back. "Neither of you is going anywhere, and I will make sure you know what real despair feels like." On our first day under house arrest in the castle, I got a real taste of what rich people call boring. Quinn set us up in a guest room that was bigger than my entire house back in the countryside. It had its own bathroom, walk-in closet, and a balcony overlooking an entire golf course. Jimmy completely lost it. He was bouncing back and forth on the king-sized bed, using the expensive down comforter as a trampoline. "Dad, are we gonna live here from now on? This is way bigger than old Mr. Wang's pig pen, this kid, and his comparisons, I swear." I wasn't feeling nearly as cheerful. I tried the door, it didn't budge. 2 bodyguards were posted outside looking like a pair of stone guardians. The windows had limiters on them, only opening a tiny crack. She really did lock me up like a prisoner. Then at lunch, a housekeeper knocked and led us to the dining room, where the long table was covered in elaborate dishes. American Western food, Chinese food, Japanese food, you name it. Quinn sat at the head of the table. Ethan sat to her left, quietly cutting his steak with a knife and fork. Jimmy and I were seated across from them, and Jimmy had never seen anything like this. He grabbed a giant Australian lobster and was about to shove the whole thing in his mouth. Jimmy spit that out. I stopped him fast. "You can't just grab food with your hands." "What kind of manners is that?" I said, while I smoothly picked up the proper utensils and cracked open the lobster for him, piling the meat onto his plate. "Thanks, Dad." Jimmy gave me the sweetest smile, picked up his fork, stabbed a piece of lobster, but didn't eat it. Instead, he held it up to my mouth. "Dad, you go first." My heart melted. I leaned in and took the bite across the table. Quinn's hand paused mid-cut. She watched our little father-son moment with an unreadable look. Ethan beside her had stopped eating too quietly, watching us. Quinn cleared her throat and broke the silence. "Jimmy," she said in a tone that left no room for debate, "starting today, you are going to learn some manners. No talking with your mouth full, no eating with your hands. You use a knife and fork." Jimmy had his mouth crammed with lobster and mumbled out a muffled question. "What's manners? Can you eat them?" Quinn's eyebrows scrunched together so tight they could tie a knot. Ethan showed him how Ethan set down his utensils, picked up a fresh set and handed them to Jimmy, then said quietly, "You hold them like this." Jimmy tried to copy him, and the fork hit the floor with a loud clang. He bent down to get it and smacked his head straight into the table leg. The whole dining room descended into pure chaos, and I watched the frazzled housekeeper and Quinn's darkening expression, and felt a tiny bit of satisfaction deep down. Yeah, that's what you get for looking down on us country folk. My kid alone could dismantle your whole castle finally after the longest meal of my life. Quinn called Ethan over and handed him a stack of toys that looked insanely expensive. "Ethan, go take your brother to the playroom." Then she looked coldly at Jimmy. "All of those are yours, take whatever you want." This was straight up bribery, and every alarm in my head started blaring. She was trying to corrupt my pure-hearted boy with money. No way Jimmy, the 2 identical boys, stood together properly for the first time, Ethan holding a transformer, looking a little lost while Jimmy walked a full circle around him, then started patting him up and down. "Nice fabric on this outfit. Way softer than my dad's undershirts." Ethan's face turned red, and he said quietly, "It's silk, come on." I know a really fun place. I hurried after them, and watched as Jimmy grabbed Ethan's hand and ran all the way to a big tree in the backyard. Watch this. Jimmy rolled up his sleeves, spat on his palms, and shimmied up that tree in about 2 seconds flat. He settled onto a branch and waved down at a completely stunned Ethan. "Come on up, the view is awesome up here." Ethan looked up with total longing but also clear fear. "I have never climbed a tree before, so what? I'll teach you." Jimmy played the role of little coach perfectly. "Grab here, put your foot there." Yeah, just like that, and with Jimmy's encouragement, Ethan actually started clumsily making his way up the tree. I leaned against the trunk, watching this whole scene with 1,000 feelings. And right then, Quinn's voice came from behind me. "Jay, do you really think this kind of upbringing is going to give him any kind of future?" I turned around and she was just standing there with that smug look. "What are you going to teach him, to raid birds' nests and go hunting in the woods?" I laughed and pointed up at the little figure working hard to climb higher. "Quinn, I can't give him $1 billion empire, but I can give him a happy childhood. And look at your son right now, doesn't he look pretty happy?" Quinn followed my gesture. And up in the tree with Jimmy's help, Ethan had finally made it onto a lower branch. He was gripping the trunk with white knuckles, but his face was lit up with a kind of excitement he'd clearly never felt before. The two boys sat side by side on the branch, and Jimmy was going on and on, pointing at the horizon, bragging about how he used to run the whole village back in the day. Quinn's expression flickered, and she went quiet. Then suddenly, crack. Everything went wrong. The branch Ethan was sitting on apparently couldn't take the weight, and a split ran through it. He screamed in terror. His body tilted sideways and he was about to fall. Ethan Quinn screamed and her face went completely white. My heart shot straight into my throat and I thought, oh no, this stupid branch. But before anyone could react, Jimmy moved like lightning. He lunged like a little monkey and wrapped both arms around Ethan's waist. Don't be scared, hold on tight. Jimmy used every bit of strength he had and yanked Ethan back from the edge, but the momentum was too much, and both boys slid off the branch together. Thankfully, they weren't too high up. They landed in the thick grass and tumbled into a heap. Quinn and I both bolted toward them at the same time. Ethan, are you okay? Quinn scooped Ethan up and checked him head to toe, her eyes turning red. Jimmy, I rushed to help my son up. Dad, my butt is like shattered into pieces. But he still turned to check on Ethan first. Hey, little suit dude, you good? Ethan was still shaken but nodded slowly, then looked at Jimmy and said quietly, thank you. It was the first time he'd ever spoken to Jimmy on his own. Quinn finished checking and found Ethan only had a minor scrape on his elbow and finally let out a breath. But then she immediately turned her fury on me. Jade, is this what you call a happy childhood, letting him drag my son into danger? If anything had happened to Ethan today, I would have made sure you spent the rest of your life behind bars. Are you serious right now? I couldn't even get a word in. Because Jimmy jumped in first. This wasn't my dad's fault. I was the one who wanted to climb the tree. Real men take a fall sometimes. I fall all the time. He puffed out his little chest and planted himself in front of me, like a tiny rooster protecting his mom, and besides, I saved him. You should be thanking me. Quinn was caught completely off guard. She stared at this kid who looked exactly like her own son, but had the attitude of a street-smart little tough guy. And for once, she had absolutely nothing to say. Mom, don't blame him. I wanted to climb it myself.